Begin the current Daf in Mesechta Yevamos Daf Kuf Chav. We begin 6 lines up in the bottom of the Yomit on Kuf Yotesima base. We continue explaining the halacha of our previous Mishnah regarding a situation where, although we were saying these prerogative regarding a woman's belief to say that her husband died, however, that's only for herself. But she's not believed, especially so for her Yevimta, as it's called, which is her husband's brother's wife. And then we continue explaining different ramifications of cases when two sister-in-laws come back and say that their husbands died, what halacha is. Everyone is joining for today's daf. So this is discussed in today's daf are the halacha that parts of panim machetim. You cannot testify that if someone died to say that you saw him, that the woman could be remarried, only if you saw the figure of his face together with the nose. Additionally, as we'll see in the next Mishnah, you can only testify when he literally died. Even if you see Maguyid, Bitsalo, the Chayachelis, but even if you see him hanging and cut up and the wild animals eating at him, until you actually see him that his soul left him, you can't testify. Get into a discussion in today's daf, Simon Derais or Simon Lav Derais, or Simon identifying features of biblical halacha or not, and that of Simon Muvik, which is that when you have a distinctive feature, that's something that would be definitively a Simon. So begin the current daf, 6 sons up at the bottom of the Yomit. We had said in the Mishnah, we spoke about this case of two brothers, Reuben and Shimon. And they were married to Rachel and Leah. And each one comes back, they went overseas, they went on some trip, these two brothers with their wives, and they come back and each one says, my husband died. So what's interesting is that although they're believed to say that their husband died, we say, because you're right, your husband died, but you have your brother-in-law who has to do the mitzvah, and both of them didn't have any children. Although each woman's believed for her own self, but she's not believed for her sister-in-law to say that her husband died, and therefore you're stuck because you still have a possible yavam. Then we said, which is where the Gemara is going to start off with, and actually our Gemara quotes these words, Nisyamu, if let's say, okay, Reuben and Shimon, we don't know, Rachel doesn't know if Shimon died, Leah doesn't know if Reuben died, but she definitely knows that her husband died. So then she goes and does Yibum with these two other brothers. Rachel does with Levi, and let's say Leah does with Yehuda. And Meisu HaYavamin, and says the Gemara, and okay, now what happens when Levi and Yehuda dies? So now we actually have Machlekes Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar. And we said this in the Mishnah, that Asurin Le'nasi, Tanakama says, okay, now I get married, as we explained to Rashi in the Mishnah, because now you're back to the prior equation. Okay, now, but Shimon might be alive for Rachel, and Reuben might be alive for Leah. So you can't go ahead and get married elsewhere, because you still have a possible Yibum situation. Rabbi Lazar says no. Once you permitted them already to marry their Yavam and their brother-in-laws, which is Achiyah Kares, so Huchul Chaladam, they're for sure permitted now to marry anyone else. You're not held bound anymore with the possible other brother-in-law of Reuben or Shimon. That is the halacha of Rabbi Lazar. Now that's where Gemara says, Boy Rabba. Rabba has the following question. My time is Rabbi Lazar. What's the reason of Rabbi Lazar that he permits the women now to marry, even though possibly that other brother-in-law is still alive? Is it Mishum Diksava because he holds Sarah Me'idu Lechaberta, a co-wife, which Rashi says it's not really technically a co-wife, it's just because two Yevamis, they're considered Tzares, they're still considered those that are in competition, and because of this element of Tzares, they would not invalidate them to say testimony one for the other, and because he holds that Tzara could testify for the other one, which Taisus brings in the Ri, he says, wait a second, how could that be what Rabbi Lazar holds? Then why wouldn't he disagree in the other paragraph of Kopit Zayin and Aleph, when we said everyone's believed to testify except for 5 women, and one of them was Tzaras and Yevimta? If Rabbi Lazar actually held that you're allowed to go ahead and testify for the Tzara, why doesn't he disagree over there? He's saying that's what he holds. He holds you're allowed to testify for the Tzara, for Yevimta. So the Ri says no. You can't compare. In the previous parak, when we spoke about the tzara of the Yevama, that was to where she's coming to testify for that woman, saying, oh, your husband died. That she's not going to be believed in according to Rabbi Lazar. Over here we're talking about where each one is not coming to testify for the other one. She's testifying for her own husband. One she's believed for herself, so believe her for the tzara too, because that's not her intention. That's the Gemara's question. No one's entertaining to say that these 5 women, we know they hate them, so we wouldn't believe him according to Rabbi Lazar. Shaila is, once we're believing her for herself, yeah, she could testify for the Chavelta, and we'll believe her that her brother-in-law, which is her husband, died. No, that's not. No, we wouldn't believe her. But Mishum Dehila Mekalkala Nafsha, she wouldn't ruin herself, which is she's marrying let's say in this case that we described, Laban Yehuda, where she's marrying the Eshes Ach, if she's marrying Eshes Ach, for sure her husband died. So then we could definitely assume that Rachel would not be bound to Shimon anymore, and that's the reason. So that's our question. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says, what's the ramification of this shaila, of this Claire? As you can do in type of Kafcha from an Aleph. If a woman goes overseas with her husband, and she comes back, she says, my husband died. Now, she had a co-wife that wasn't able to go. That wife had to watch the kids. And the other wife, she got to go on the trip with the husband. They switch off the trips, the co-wives. So she went, she comes back. The question is, to go ahead and marry off the co-wife. If she's going to get married with the testimony of her co-wife, before that woman who was on the trip in the Bermuda came back and says that the husband died, can the other wife remarry first? As the Gemara explains. If you say like the first option that the Gemara is asking, that a co-wife could testify for a friend. Again, like place to qualify when she's really testifying for herself, and it's just parenthetical. It's going ahead and it's helping for that one. Okay, then then even though that woman herself, who is the tzara, the yevimto, however you want to call it, didn't get married, but she is believed, especially when it's in this indirect way. But if you say the whole reason is based on because she wouldn't ruin herself, and if she's doing it for sure, she'll be believed for the yevamto too. Well, then if she gets married, then you can marry off the go-wife. But if she herself didn't remarry it based on what she said that her husband died overseas, then you can't remarry the co-wife because she didn't ruin herself yet. So that's what the halachic ramification would be of this question about why do we believe, according to Rabbi Lazar, the Yevimta, if it's because of that we believe her, so barring we believe her, and because it's indirect believing, or that we say no, because she wouldn't ruin herself. Well, that's only if she would ruin herself. If she didn't marry it, then you don't know if she's saying the truth. What's the halacha? Moses Tashmat's being a raya from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, regarding the case that we described, with let's say they got married to the Yevamim. Of course, each one knows that her husband died, and there definitely is a mitzvah even for the other brothers, Laban Yehuda, and then the Laban Yehuda died. So now what happens now? Now you're back to just Reuben and Shimon again. Rabbi said, since we already permitted Rachel and Leah to marry Laban Yehuda, so okay, now we're not concerned anymore for the possible other brother-in-law. They're permitted to marry any other person. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If you say, like the second option we had asked, the Hiloi Mekalkal Nafsha, because she's not going to ruin her own self to ruin her co-wife or her possible her sister-in-law. So we can understand the Chiyinsiv when they got married to Laban Yehuda. So therefore, min sabin Allah. So definitely we can marry off, and she herself, this Leah, married Laban Yehuda, who's an Eshes Ach. If she's marrying a Laban Yehuda, obviously that she wouldn't ruin herself. So you could let now Rachel marry other people because we don't assume that the husband of Leah is still alive, because Leah herself went and married Eshes Ach. So that would make sense why now you can marry off and marry other people. But if it's like the first option we had said, that because simply a tzara could testify for her co-wife or a yevamta for her sister-in-law, so then Avagav Nami. So why did Rabbi Lazar have to say that, when they marry Laban Yehuda and then Laban Yehuda die and then... So why do you have to say that? Even if she didn't marry anyone else. She's believed to testify for her. When she's saying about her own husband, we believe her for her, even if there was no Laban Yehuda. So the Shema Minah already confirmed from this, the time that Rabbi Lazar must be the reason Rabbi Lazar is specifically Mishum the Insib, who is because she went ahead and she married first. And she's not going to ruin herself. But if she didn't marry it, let's say this co-wife went overseas and she comes back and she says, my husband died, and she's twiddling her thumbs, and the other co-wife's like, oh yeah, okay, she gets remarried. No, you can't do that because not Mekalkal Nash over there. So that would seemingly resolve the question. So the Gemara, no, that wouldn't prove the question. Because Rabbi Lazar, l'devreim kamalu. Rabbi Lazar, in this case, was only going according to the opinion of those that dispute him. And that is as follows. Lididi, he was saying, according to me, yes, one co-wife could testify for the other one, again in this indirect way. And therefore, even though she didn't get married herself, you could let the co-wife get married because we do believe her. The reason why he disagreed in such a case was according to you that you hold it forbidden for her to remarry. at least agree to me the where if she herself got married, I'm sure we could remarry the co-wife. She wouldn't ruin herself. If she did even with Laden Yehuda, or she got married to someone else and be even assuming she wouldn't ruin her own self. If her husband's still alive and she'll be stuck and everything, boil, bow, whatever. So then that at least agree with me in that case, but that wouldn't prove Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar would hold even if it's not Mekalkal Nafsh. At least Mekalkal Nafsh would agree to me, which Rabbanan, no, they disagree even though over there, based on the pasuk in Shaftim, which is Shimshon Agibah says, Thomas Nafshiim Pelishtim. Let my soul die with the Philistines. I'll bring the house down, and Anaki if I die too. That's who the cup. That's what she's going to do. So it's not a right. Even Mekalkal Nafsh, she'll go and ruin herself. She'll bagrub zechalein just to get back at someone else. That's how much she hates this potential, this yivinta, this sister-in-law, and therefore it's not a raya. Meaning that therefore the Rabban disagree, but upon them it's not a right to Rabbi Elazar because could be he was just trying to say at least you agree to there, and they say no, even they would not agree. So the Master Tashma is trying to bring another raya because the Brisa says the Isha shaholchi hiu balam ninsayam. You have a woman that she and her husband goes overseas. And she comes along and she says meis bali. She says my husband died. So the halacha is okay. As we've said in the previous parakim, Tinasei, she says her husband died, she get remarried. We believe the woman herself, but Tidik Subasa, she can collect like Suba. And but with Sarasa Suba, but her co-wife is forbidden because the time they come to the Rabbana hold that a woman is not believed regarding her co-wife. Rabbi Elazar, he says, no, since the woman herself is permitted, Hutrina mitzarasa. So the co-wife is also permitted. So you see that the moment we permit the woman herself, we permit the co-wife, even though she didn't get married yet. So you see, like that first option, that she's believed regarding her tzara, according to Rabbi Elazar. The Gemara says, no, that's not a raya, because you could say that hoyel v'hutra v'nisses. What it should say is that since she's permitted and she got married, so therefore that's what we say that the tzara going to get remarried, but maybe it would require her to first get married, because maybe it's like the second option, because she wouldn't be mekalkal herself, according to Rabbi Elazar. But now the Gemara asks and says, wait a second. If the reason Rabbi Elazar is not because a tzara could testify for her friend, like you want to reject, and you want to say the reason is based on because she wouldn't ruin herself, but then I have a following question. The leichish, then you have to be concerned, if you say the whole reason why you believe her is only because she wouldn't ruin herself. So if it's only in the case of ruination, we would say that, okay, she wouldn't just, Rabbi Elazar does not agree to the principle of Thomas Nafshim Belishtim. If she's going to do it, then obviously it also is true for the other one. But how do you know, even if she gets remarried, that it's true what she said that her husband died? What do you mean? How could, of course, right? Or else she'll be ruined. No. Let's be concerned that maybe the husband gave her a get overseas. Get in a fight, they went to court, gave him the bezdin, gave him a get. Then she comes back and she says, my husband died. Now, why is she saying this? Because she's trying to ruin her co-wife. Because she wants that the co-wife should also get remarried. And she's not going to get ruined because she has a get. Meaning, we understand the halacha of the Mishnah when they do Yibum, which was Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and this Rachel and Leah were married to Reuben and Shimon, and then they do Yibum to Levi, Yehuda. That you can't say such a question, because even if she came with a get, she would still be ruining herself because she's marrying her husband's brother, which that's forbidden, Eishazach. So she wouldn't be ruining herself. But when she's marrying other people, like in the case over here, how do you know that she's being mekalkal nafsha to believe it regarding the tzara? She might have a get. Says the Gemara, no, it can't be. Because you're right, Ida Insabli Yisrael, if she was marrying Yisrael Hanami, you're right, then we would be concerned. We wouldn't allow the co-wife to get remarried, because maybe she has a get, maybe she's lying about the death. The Insab L'Koyin is where she got married to a Koyin. If her husband's going to ultimately come, which is the case if she's lying, really he's alive, he just gave her a get. So then she's going to have to show her get, then she'll be puzzled from her husband to Koyin, because she's a Gerusha. She have to leave. So she wouldn't ruin herself. So if she marries a Koyin, that's the case that we know that she's saying the truth, because else she'll be Mekalkal Nafsha, and only then do we believe her, according to that tzad that the Gemara is trying to say. The Gemara didn't resolve the question at the end what Rabbi Elazar hold. According to that tzad that it's because of Mekalkal Nafsha, you're right, it would have to be such a case. We continue the halacha, the next Mishnah, again, continuing to qualify the death of the husband when we allow the woman to get remarried, whether it be herself, whether it be Eid Echad, whoever it is, the halacha is Ima Eden. We don't testify regarding a person that he died. Ella, only if they see him dead, al partziv panim imachaitim. They have to see the form of his face with his nose, that they can recognize him that he's that person. But if they don't see his face, or let's say his nose was taken off, you cannot testify to marry off his wife, because it might not be that person. Even though they identify his clothing, they identify his body, that's not enough to allow the person to get remarried. Now, you also cannot testify only till the person's life actually left. Even if they see him cut up, where he's full of wounds and he's stabbed with the swords, and if he's hanging on the gallows, or a wild animal is pouncing on him, and it's eating from him, doesn't make a difference. You have to actually see him dead to testify. Moreover, says the Mishnah, you could only testify up until a period of 3 days. Meaning, if you see him within 3 days of his death, then you can testify. But if you didn't see him until after 3 days, we could that maybe the form of his face changed, and it's not the person that you think he is. He disagrees. He says, no, not every single person, not every single place, not all times are the same. Meaning, you have a certain person that would be quick to swell and blow up more than any other person. For example, a fatty person. You have a place that's hotter and sunnier and more humid than other places, and the person who dies over there is quick to decay and to change. And then you have certain times when the world is hotter, and therefore, again, the person who dies decays quicker. And the Gemara is going to ask, is he coming to be machmor, or is he coming to be mekel? Is he coming to say that sometimes it can be less than 3 days, or something that could even be more than 3 days? That's going to be the Gemara's question. But first, the Gemara goes to explain the halacha of our Mishnah, of the Reishon. So, turn on the Braisa. This it says padachas, that you have to have let's say you see only the forehead, but you don't see the form of the face. Or let's say parts upon him, you see the form of his face, but not his forehead. That's something you have. There's a bombing or whatever, or some type of building collapse or something, but the person is dead and you can't see both of them. So you cannot testify to allow the woman to get remarried. That's shiur name until you see the forehead with the figure of the face with the nose. You have to have all these things to be able to fully identify the person. Some says Rav Kahana, he says, Micro, what's a pasuk in Yeshaya? It says hakaras panehem, the recognition of their face. Technology likes using face recognition these days. That's unsabam. That's something that will testify regarding them. So obviously you see that the testimony regarding the rest of the body is not going to be sufficient. It has to be with hakaras panehem. That's what's going to testify them the recognition of their face. Now the Gemara brings a story that Abba Bamarta, that he's the same that's called Abba Bar Yommi, have a maski be debedesh galusa zuzi. So from the household of the Resh Galusa, which he was the leader of the Jewish people in the exile, in the diaspora, they were trying to collect money from him. He had collections against him. So Isi Kida, he brought wax, and Davik Bivlisa, he went and he took it and he attached it to a small worn out piece of cloth, and Davik Bapuse, and he stuck it on his forehead. Chalav Kamayu V'loy Bashkarua. So he walked in front of him and they didn't recognize him. This was from the original masks. The detectives that walk around that they shouldn't recognize him, just covered his forehead and they couldn't recognize him. Again, that's just saying that the forehead is a very critical part of face recognition, and therefore you see they didn't recognize him. But the halacha, the Mishnah said, so we said that even though that there are simanim in his body, in his vessels, his garments, that's not going to be sufficient to allow the woman to get remarried. So the Gemara says, is that to say the simanim lav daraisa? It sounds like you're telling me that for the biblical law of a woman getting remarried, that simanim is not going to be sufficient. So that means to say if someone gives an identifying feature, that's not biblically valid. The Gemara says, that seems to be contradicted from the following brisa. The brisa is talking about if someone's bringing a get to a woman and he loses the get. He can't find it. He's like, where's that document? I brought it all the way from overseas to give it to the woman. And then matzai kasha, because he finds it attached to a purse, to a wallet, a barniki, a purse, or whatever, with a bas, a ring, or ishnim to ben caleb, or it's found amongst the vessels of his house. And he recognizes that purse, that ring, that it's his. So even if he finds it after a long period of time, kosher, it's going to be kosher. And what is the chiddush? We're not concerned that maybe this purse or this ring is from someone else, and therefore this get is from someone else too. Obviously, we rely on the siman that he has, that it's his purse and it's his wallet, even to permit an iser eshes ish dairaisa. So obviously, we see that simanim are dairaisa, biblical. So how do we resolve this contradiction regarding allowing the woman to remarry based on simanim? So the Gemara says, "Amabai says like Kash, not difficult. It's a machlekes. This Bryce is Rabbi Eliezer ben Mahabai, and our Mishnah is like Rabbanan, as the Gemara explained the time we learned the Bryce of this machlekes. Ein meidna l'shuma. The Rabbanan hold like our Mishnah that you cannot testify regarding a mole. A person has a birthmark, a mole, you can't testify. So although that's a siman will love the eraisa. He says, no, maiden, you could testify. And therefore that's why it says in the Brisa that when you have a get that was lost and you find it amongst your vessel, that siman that you identified as your purse will be the eraisa. It's a machlekes tanoim. Says the Gemara, my lab, isn't this what they're disagreeing about? The Marasava, Rabbi Eliezer ben Mabai holds Simon deraisa. The biblical, and where do you know this from? That Simon are biblical. So that's from a Gemara that says, Afa similar b'chlales. I already said, why do you have to say similar when you're returning a lost object? And the Elam is to tell you that just like a similar has simonim, usually someone's clothing you could identify, so to anything that has identifying feature, biblically you would have to do Hashavas Aveda. That's how Rabbi Eliezer ben Mabai holds. Marsa Rabbanon. Oh no, Simonim Rabbanon. Simonim are only rabbinic. So isn't this what they're disagreeing about? So that would resolve the contradiction. It's machlekes tanoim. So Amar Rabbi says no. He disagrees with Rabbi. And there's two different ways of understanding Rabbi. So the kulam, according to everyone, Simonim derais. I don't have to say that the machlekes is a machlekes of Simonim derais Rabbanon. Everyone holds a simon is biblical. So wait a second. If it's biblical, how do you understand the halacha of our Mishnah? Oh, because here the machlekes is b'shuma mitzuya b'ben gilui k'mefleki. The machlekes that we brought in this brisa is regarding if a shuma you could identify a person or not. Is that of course the sim is deraisa, so you should be able to identify with a mole. The question is, someone who's born in the same period and with the same mazel as someone else, is it common that the person would have the same shuma, the same mole as that person? Yes, someone that's born at the same time, the same mazel, would have the same mole, and therefore it's not a simon to say, oh, we saw that simon, because it might be another guy who lives in the next town over, might have the same exact mole, and you can't identify to allow the woman to get remarried based on that. Whereas the Marsa, the lesbian Mavai held that it's not common to have the same mole, the same birthmark on the neck in the same place, and therefore that would be a valid simon. But again, everyone holds simon the race. The question is if this is a valid simon. That's one interpretation. Or there are those that say that meaning in the same shot, just slightly different. Here, here regarding does a mole change from its color after death? That's what they're disagreeing about. Mar Savar, again, everyone agrees on the rice, it's still in the same first shot. The question is, so what's the machlekes? Either would we say that you cannot identify with the shumah because someone else might have it, the same Ben Gilui, or no, regarding do we think that even if it's a simon, but it's going to change after death, so that wouldn't be an identifying feature. He said, yeah, a person's mole will change colors after he dies, and therefore that's not a valid simon. Whereas a Mar Savar, but the Rabbi Eliezer ben Mabai held that no, it's not going to change, it's going to be a simon. But again, that's essentially the machlekes is, everyone agrees simon there. Right? So the question is, would it change because of after Misa, or are we concerned that maybe that the Ben Gila has the same? Those say a different interpretation. Amar said the Kulama, according to the second version, everyone holds Simon de Rabban. Actually, Simon are rabbinic, because although we say Afa Simla, that what I mean, don't we say it's Simon are Daraisa by Hashavas Aveda? No, that actually they darshan that why is the Torah singling out a garment is actually to tell you that it has to have claimants. And it's excluding if, let's say, something was a person gave up hope or it's hefker. Which there is a machlekes how to interpret what is an afa simla, meaning it says in the Torah that you have to return this and that and that. Why is it mentioned an article of clothing? Why is it was included in returning all lost objects? To tell you either that, oh, just like a garment usually has an identifying feature, you could say, yeah, I had a tear over here, I had that, I could identify it. Or, no, those old simon deraisa are not learning that, oh, just like a simla has a simon, so the other has a simon. No, it's just telling you that just like a garment, usually someone has a claimant because it's not a natural item. Someone had this garment made for him or he bought it in the store, and there was a give me my jacket, it has to have a teveya, contrary to something that's hefker, you would know, or he was meyayish, you wouldn't have a halacha of Hashavas Aveda. So again, you could say even though Simanim is rabbinic, now, so we can understand the halacha of our Mishnah. If a siman is not deraisa, obviously we're not going to let if a woman get remarried based on the siman, because it's not a biblical halacha. But then what's the machlekes regarding that of b'shuma? But over here is b'shuma as we get into the bays siman muvakum. Here the machlekes is regarding, do we consider a mole as a distinctive sign? Mar Sabr Belezman Mavai held siman muvik. It is considered a distinctive sign. So as Rashi explains, even though you're telling me that simanim is drabanan, but such a siman we would rely on it even by Issa Dairaisa. It's not stam a siman. It's a distinctive feature, just like we let with Eid Echad, we also would let with a siman muvik. Whereas a Mar Sabr, but the Rabbanan, which is the town of our Mishnah, held lav siman muvik. No, a mole is not a distinctive feature. And again, therefore, because of that it's siman of the Rabbanan, we would not allow a woman to get remarried based on a shuma or any other sign.
What can we say about a get that we really rely on what's written in the get? Seven is just a smachta, like we don't answer like this without me go. If I get you.
Yeah. Right. Well, but that's regarding relying on the woman. It's not really relying on what she's saying. We really know what it says in the get. Here the question is, it's not really relying on the get. It's the question is this another get? Might be another Reuben and Leah that are getting divorced. How do I know it's from me? Maybe someone else had that same Reuben and Leah. Yeah, why we chayshish for that? But it might be another get. It's not so much the get mechiach of the veracity of the honesty of the get, but rather it just might be a different get. I don't know that it's going to be.
The third person that messes the rules, not about the Xavish, but the get should be third person.
That what that.
Then we have Shana Makira the get, the kiss Tzvi Asai.
And there's Shoshet Tzvi Asai. Yeah. So what does he say?
Items that got lost, so
So never the nigga they could say I didn't lose it. Yeah. So therefore we have two different interpretations essentially with Rava. And you don't have to say it's machlekes tanoim. You could say everyone agrees if siman deraisa or not deraisa, and the machlekes is regarding what type of a siman is this shum. But then the Gemara says, going back to the first version, according to the first version of Rava, that he says siman deraisa, everyone agrees that siman is biblical. So it was only a specific machlekes regarding that of a shuma. Would that be an identifying feature or not? Because again, or but then hakatani, then this that we learned in the Mishnah that said that even though there's identifying features in the person's body or in his garments, you cannot let him marry. Why not? According to that version, someone deraisa, I understand the shuma, a mole, is because he said someone else might have the same mole. Someone else, it might change after death. But regarding some other siman in his body, why would that not be a valid siman? In his body, that's the actual siman. So the Gemara says, you're right. When we say gufai, that it's not a siman in his body, it's just because you were saying the arich v'gutz, you were saying he's tall or short. That's not a siman, and many people are tall and short. And Caleb, when you're saying regarding his garments, why is that not a siman? Is because the chashinu l'she'ela. Because then maybe he lent his clothing to someone else, and that guy died, and they're going to see him, they're going to think that that's the owner of the garments, which is not the case. That's why it's not a siman. But you're right, of course it would be a siman. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If you're really concerned about lending things, so then what do you do with a donkey with the signs of its saddle, which the Gemara in Bam Metzia, the Chavzayin Manaf and El Metzia says that you would return it based on the siman in the saddle. How do you return the guy's donkey because identifying the saddle? Maybe he lent the saddle to someone else and it's that other person's donkey. So the Gemara, no, good question, but people don't lend saddles because the owner of this donkey wouldn't lend it to someone else. The maskiv leilacham, because it would irritate the donkey. You have to keep the saddle on where it is, and you don't want to lend it out. So then the Gemara, however, asks another question. It says, now, so you spoke about a case of bringing a get, and you said matzei kesher bekis. If let's say he lost the get, and you find it attached to the wallet or ba'arniki, to the purse or the tabasa, to a ring. So heichem ladrina, and how could you go ahead and return it to the woman? What are you going to say? That you should be concerned that even though he recognizes the purse, that you should be concerned that maybe he lent it to someone else, and maybe that guy tied a get to it, and now you're giving it back to this person, and he forgot the get. So if you're telling me that you could, even if you tell me some deraisa, but if you tell me you're concerned for lending, so maybe this guy lent his purse or ring to someone else, and that guy attached the get, meaning he doesn't know if this is the get. He's saying because it's his purse, he recognizes his purse, so therefore you give him back to get, and you could use the get. But how do you know? Maybe he lent it to someone else. So you want to know here also the same type of answer. He wouldn't lend it out. Tabas, by a person's signet ring, is chayish l'ziyufe. He's concerned that maybe someone else is going to make a seal and a form is in the same as his own ring, and then the guy's going to show that seal to his wife to say, "Here, look, your husband said that you should give me everything that I'm asking to borrow," which never was the case. So a person doesn't lend out his ring because the person, that's the signet ring they had. The rings that they had was their seal. And kisva arniki, regarding lending out his purse or his wallet, minachshi inshi. People are superstitious about this, that they don't want their mazel to be taken away, and they don't lend out their wallet or their purse, because it's something that's like their money. My money, I don't want anyone taking my mazel, my money. Now, Rashi says, if you're going to ask, what do you mean? But we said, Oishanim to bein kalim. We said, or let's say you find it amongst his own kalim, but we said in the Mishnah that we're concerned for lending. What do you do with that case over there, and you find it bein kalim? How do you, maybe you lent those kalim? Says Rashi, that's not difficult, because when the Mishnah said kalov, that means his garments. And the norm is to lend that person's clothing. Whereas when you say by gittin, kalov, that's, he finds it amongst his own household items, which the norm is not to lend those things. So the different kalim mean different things in different contexts. When we said in our Mishnah, kalim that's not good enough to identify the person based on his kalim who's dead, that's garments. Garments you would lend. Maybe he lent his jacket to someone that the guy was wearing, and that's the guy who died. So that's his jacket. He always wears the green jacket. It's not going to help. Whereas when we say by getting that he finds Ben Caleb that it is good to use as a get, because that's it means his household items. He finds it amongst his lawn set or whatever, those things that people wouldn't lend necessarily. Then you'll say that that's going to work because the money is there. Or if you want, you could say.
Doesn't the get have his name in it?
What?
The get doesn't have his name already in it?
The get?
Yeah.
Well, the get just says that Reuben is divorcing Leah, and we don't know. There might be another Reuben and Leah divorcing, so he doesn't know if it's the get that he was supposed to bring. But he only knows it based on identifying the item that's his. We're saying, but maybe it's not. It might be lent. So we're saying that these items you're not going to lend to anyone. So if it's connected to your purse or to your ring, you know for sure that it's yours. You never lent it out, and therefore the get is the get that you brought. Or if you want, you could say that the truth is we're not concerned for lending. So if we're not concerned for lending, why don't you identify the person based on his clothing? Because when we say Kalov in the Mishnah, that we said that identifying his body and his Kalov, we can't rely on the siman, is b'chivad v'sumki. It's just that if you say it's red or white, that we don't say a siman in a person's clothing if it's black or white, because that's not a siman, because many clothing are black and white and red, and therefore, yeah, if you had a really good siman, then there would be a siman, but that's not even a siman, and therefore that's why we said that would not be valid. Now we said in the Mishnah that even if you see the guy all cut up, until you actually see him dead, you cannot testify to allow the woman to know. Says, well, remember, is that to say the muguyid chayi? Is that really to say that if someone is cut up, he could still survive? But it seems to be contradicting from Mishnah Masechtas Olis. Mishnah says, Adam ein metame, a person will not contaminate as a dead person until his soul leaves him. Afil muguyid, even if he's cut up, even if he's in the throes of death. Now the inference is to muyila metame, that he's just not going to be metame as a mess. But it sounds like a machai lachai. That's a chiddush. Even if he's not going to survive, but lemaisa, he's still not going to be metame. But he's going to survive. I mean he's not going to survive. Even though he's not going to survive, he's not going to metame. And our Mishnah says that he could survive. So Mavai says, like Kasha, you're right, it's a machlekes tanoim. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who holds that he could survive. The Mishnah Olis is Rabban, who holds that he would not survive. And that's a chiddush, even if he would not survive, but he would not be metam at the time, like in the Brisa. And it's actually machlekes. The Tanakama says, Me'idin ala maguyid. You could testify regarding someone who's cut up because he will not survive. That is like the Mishnah Masechtas Alis. But you cannot testify regarding someone who's hanging on the gallows. He might survive. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Lazar says, no, you cannot testify even that someone who's cut up, because you could use a way of cauterizing, you could make a way of singeing it, and he could survive. So again, it's a machlekes online, this idea, as we see clearly in this price, so it's not a contradiction, it's a machlekes. Says the Gemara, but in Mimatzis Lazar, could you really say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon Lazar, who holds that a Maguyid could survive, and therefore that's why you cannot testify regarding a Maguyid who's cut up? But Vakatani Seifa, the end of our Mishnah, meaning the next Mishnah, Chafal and Aleph, which called the Seifa of our Mishnah, says, Ma'aseh Asya, there's a story in Asya, the Echad Shashil Shaluliyam, there's someone that they lowered him down to the sea, and when they tried to get him back out of the sea, they only got his leg. So the sage said, depends where his leg that you got. Minar Kubalamala, if the part of his leg that you recovered was above the knee, then Tinase, then you could let the wife remarry. But Minar Kubalamata, but if the part of his leg that you recovered was beneath the knee, then Leit Tinase, then you cannot let her get remarried because he could survive. Now, says Rashi, what about the fact that he drowned? Now, since it's waters that's called Ein Lem Sayif, as we'll see later on, that there's no end to it, so we're concerned actually that maybe he came out of the water. And it could be he came at a distance of a parasol more and you just didn't see him. So that's not a concern. So therefore, since the injury was beneath the knee and he could come out somewhere else in the water, therefore he might still be alive. But one thing is you see, but if let's say his leg was cut, you recovered a leg in the water, the divers went in, all they got was the leg was above the knee, you told me that the wife could get remarried. What is that called? That's Maguyid, where he's cut up. And you see that he will not survive, and that's our Mishnah. You tell me that our Mishnah, like Rabbi Shimon Lazar, who holds that Maguyid could survive, and therefore you cannot let the wife get remarried. Here you see clearly that the same the Mishnah holds that no, that he cannot survive. Says the Gemara, no, Shani Maya, water is different because the Marzumaka, what it does is it actually it compounds the wound, and it actually makes it more difficult, and therefore you cannot cauterize it. And therefore, that's why we know he's for sure going to die if the injury was above the knee. But in general, if he's Maguyid, actually you could still cauterize it, and therefore he might still survive. So that's not a contradiction. Now the Gemara asks in general, regarding this halacha of likavis that you tell me that Rabbi Shimon Lazar holds, that Maguyid you cannot testify because they could cauterize it, but I mean that stops the bleeding and that could maintain the life. But he says, he says, I saw this Arab merchant, the Shokos Hafsida, took a knife, and he stabbed his camel, and it didn't stop that it's screaming, it was braying until it died. Meaning to say, essentially that you see it dies right away, there's nothing you could do about it. I thought you'd tell me that when you're cut up and stabbed that you could cauterize it. So Abai says, no, but that was a very weak one, but in general, yeah, you could go ahead and stop it, and the animal, the creature, the person could survive. Now, one last answer the Gemara says, to resolve the prior contradiction, Rava Amar, he says that actually our Mishnah is talking about Masakin Milubenes. We're talking about that the knife was actually a superheated knife that actually, because of the burn, it actually heals. Because that itself cauterizes and never it can even be like everyone, meaning it doesn't have to be like the first answer the Gemara gave, like Rabbi Shimon Lazar, who he holds that Yochli Chavez. Even like the Rabban hold generally that a Maguyid you could testify, that's regularly when it's cut up. When you actually cut up with a burning hot knife, everyone would agree that that could achieve recovery automatically, and therefore that Nahalach of the Mishnah doesn't even have to be like Rabbi Shimon Lazar, it could actually be like everyone. Now we said additionally that you cannot testify until the person loses his life, even if you see that a wild animal is eating at him, you cannot testify until you actually see that he's dead. Now, I'm going to read the Mishnah. It says, we didn't learn this, that you cannot testify only if the animal is eating at him from a place where the soul does not leave. But if let's say the animal is eating from him at a place where that would cause a person's soul to leave, then you can testify even if you don't see him actually dead. A related teaching, again from Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, he says, Shachad by Shnaim or Reiv Shnaim Ubarach. Let's say someone had it, that the two pipes, his food pipe and his windpipe, both of those were slaughtered on the person, or at least the majority of them, and he fled. Me'idin, you could testify that he's dead, and the wife could remarry. Says the Gemara, Ini, is that really so? But Rabbi Shloimy himself said that shachar beishnaim or rev shnayim. Let's say someone, his two pipes or the majority of his two pipes were slaughtered. V'ramaz, and he can't talk. His pipes are severed, but he makes it with his hands. V'aman, he says, "Kiss v'get leishti." Write a get for my wife, like he's showing with the symbol to write to get to his wife. So they could write and they could give it. So obviously we presume him to be, as he's still alive, even when his two pipes were cut. So why tell me that you could testify that he's dead? Says the Gemara, yeah, he's alive now, and never the gets again. But he's going to die, and then you can testify that he is dead. But the Gemara says, wait a second, if that's the case, since you know definitively he's going to die, so someone slaughters another person by mistake. Let's say the guy is in the shlachtos, and he drops the knife, another guy is there on the floor, he's trying to get something, he drops the knife, and it slaughters another person by mistake. He should have to go to Gullus al Yadeh through him because of he's for sure going to die, and that's the halacha of Gullus. Allah Matani said, why do we learn in the Brayso Shachat Shnayim or Rev Shnayim that if someone slaughters someone's two pipes or the majority of two pipes, how does it Eina Goyla, he doesn't go into exile even if the guy dies? Why not? There's a case of for sure killing a person. So it says the Gemara, we learned on that halacha. The Amar Avishi says, I'll tell you why. Because we're concerned, he's for sure going to die, but we're concerned the Shemaruach Bel Belasai. We're concerned that maybe he ended up dying because of the wind. So therefore, regarding Gullus, he's going to be putter, because for Gullus, it has to be that the entire death was from the person who killed him. So here, where it could have been that the wind actually exacerbated it, so that's not the liability of the one who slaughtered his two pipes. Now, regarding his wife, we for sure can testify because we know he's going to die. The question is, what's going to end up killing him? That might be the wind. Or Inami, it could be, Shemi Ihu, as we continue with Chav Manav, Kirav Misasai. Maybe the guy himself, the victim, caused his death to come quicker because he was thrashing around more than was necessary, and therefore he died. So that's not going to cause the person to go into Gullus, only if he dies only exclusively from what he did to him. Which Gemara says, my banai, what's the difference between these two different pshatim if it's because maybe the wind did it or the guy was thrashing around? So two cases, which are the inverse of each other. Either the shachte bevesa the sheisha, if you slaughtered him in a house made out of marble where there's no wind, upirkas, but the guy was thrashing around. So according to the interpretation that the wind could have caused it, he would go into Gullus because there's no wind over him, and he died because of him. But according to the interpretation, it's because maybe the victim himself caused his death to come closer, well, he wouldn't go into Gullus because the guy was being mefarches. Or Inami, the other way around is the shachte bepra, if you slaughter him outside where there is wind, upirkas, but the guy didn't have to thrash around, where again, according to the Manda Amar, that it's the ruach, then he would not go into Gullus. According to one of Pirkas, then he would go into Gullus. Thank you to any time.